I couldn't have asked for a more knowledgeable panel to navigate us through this difficult discussion. We have distinguished representatives from different parts of the southern Mediterranean, different coasts, if you may, who all have a different relation to the EU. I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Tiago Antunes, the Secretary of State for European Affairs of Portugal. It's a pleasure to welcome Mr. Senén Florensa Palau, who's the Executive President for, at the European Institute for the Mediterranean, Mr. Wadie Abunassar, who is the Director and Founder of the International Center for Consultations in Israel. And last but not least, we have a guest from the Aegean Sea, Mr. Gabriel Haritos, who is a research fellow at Ben Gurion Research Institute for the Study of Israel and Zionism and Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy in Greece. Welcome to all of you, and thanks for joining us. Without losing any time, I would like to dive directly into the discussion and start with Mr. Florensa. The Mediterranean goes beyond Europe. When you look at different coastal countries at the Mediterranean, you see a diverse spectrum of political and cultural identities. Mr. Florensa, can we speak of any Mediterranean commonalities, maybe similarities in terms of foreign policy? What brings us together and what separates us?
Okay, so thank you very much, really. I appreciate it's an honor to be here with all of you, although it's a complicated point in time because we have a strong concurrence. Right, the other side is on Ukraine, so I have to accept that people really think that Ukraine is a much urgent need. Anyway, I would like, obviously, to thank the invitation to be here and, well, present my deepest sentiment for the floods that have been incurring here in Slovenia. Going to your point, well, the Mediterranean, it has been always an area of complicated history, very diverse, but it's an area of communication as well. In terms, for example, of the difference between North and South, there is a factor of about 10 times higher income per capita in the European Union than in Northern Africa. And we have tried to overcome that in the last years, especially since '95, when the European Union finally launched a big operation, launching the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership, the Barcelona process, which is a very complex but complete framework of foreign policy that's participated North and South, creating this association. In fact, there is, well, this has been reinforced from a bilateral side of the relations with each country through the European neighborhood policy since 2004, and then since 2008 with the creation of the Union for the Mediterranean. And in fact, beneath this whole arrangement, well, there is an economic side of it. The European Union has been devoting roughly 1 billion euros per year of grant funds from the European Commission, plus 2 billion of loans from the European Investment Bank, plus, well, the economic and technical assistance to bring about reforms in South Mediterranean countries. And this was the commitment from both sides, so that the European Union would open its markets and to the exports from the South to help them develop, etc. And the South would introduce, with this assistance from the European Union, the necessary reforms. Now, the point is that neither side really accomplished what had been committed, because with 1 billion, it is clear that you cannot draw about historical evolution, to bring about development, to bring about the process of democratization, etc., with 1 billion for an area of 300 million inhabitants. And from the other side, well, and the markets never really opened except for industrial products, but it didn't, the free trade area was not extended to agriculture, nor did it was extended to services. And from the south, they didn't really introduce the reforms. They introduced some reforms, but really not the necessary reforms to bring about the modernization of their economy, their society, their institutions. Finally, the populations of these countries themselves took it at hand and brought about the Arab Springs. Well, they have failed, and now we will see that with the invasion of Ukraine, for example, we are surprised at the votings at the United Nations, and to see how much they do not share the same preoccupations as the European side. And we wonder what is going on, why is it so? And it is because this immense, very complex, but very complete and thorough pact to, as it was stated in '95, to build around the Mediterranean an area of peace and stabilization, an area of shared economic progress, an area of intercultural dialogue and understanding, well, did not succeed so far. The project is extremely interesting and promising, even today, but the means that have been given for that have not proved to be enough sufficiently. And therefore, we are still to overcome this in a complex situation now, where we will have to take care of which kind of new world order we want to bring about. And for that, we have to take care that the whole of the Mediterranean area, north or south, stands together in the same side in this world order.
Thank you, Mr. Florensa. You have touched upon very important points, including conflicts. We are going to come back to that later. And the development of the Euro-Mediterranean partnership. What we have now is the new agenda for the Mediterranean, which is supposed to promote a partnership-based positive approach. I think it's worth digging a bit deeper into it. Mr. Antunes, what can you tell us about the perception of the Portuguese government regarding its relations to the southern neighborhood? What kind of partnership does Portugal expect, imagine, want to have with its southern neighbors?
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here talking about this topic. I usually start with the disclaimer that although Portugal is not technically on the Mediterranean Sea, we are deeply Mediterranean. We feel deeply Mediterranean. We are Mediterranean at heart. And that's why we care so much about the southern neighborhood within the EU framework, and why we insist so much on it. And I will start by saying the obvious, that something in which we keep pressing, is that right now, obviously, the focus is very much on the east of Europe, on what's happening since the war of aggression in Ukraine started. This is very much understandable and inevitable, I would say. But let's not lose sight of the southern neighborhood as well. And so we need to keep our eyes, focused on the east, but also mindful of what's happening around the Mediterranean. And this is key. And that's why we believe it is important that the current presidency of the European Union, the Spanish presidency, is giving high momentum to this issue with a summit, a ministerial summit of the European Union with the southern neighborhood scheduled for the end of the year. And the focus on this new agenda for the Mediterranean and on its implementation. Actually, we co-signed a non-paper last May with the other Med9 countries. See, we are part of the Med9. And since the very beginning, this is the group of member states of the European Union, the southern member states of the European Union around the Mediterranean. And we co-signed a non-paper on the implementation of this new agenda for the Mediterranean. And indeed, there are a number of areas in which we can and we should do more, enhancing our cooperation with the southern neighborhood. And I'll just name a few. Food security and access, affordable access to foodstuff is absolutely key, particularly since Russia has been weaponizing food. And now, with them moving out of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, it is key to ensure to do everything in our power with solidarity lanes, with the whole range of actions the European Union has in place to ensure the flow of grains and foodstuff to the global south, and in this case, in particular, to the north of Africa, in our southern neighborhood. And this is key, obviously, for the stabilization of the region. Then on energy, we are so much focused now on diversifying away from Russia. And so we have to look at the south, obviously, and not only in terms of traditional sources of energy, but also renewable energy and the huge potential there is for that in the southern Mediterranean. On disaster risk reduction, for instance, and climate adaptation, there's a lot we can do, we need to do. And there are common challenges, of course, between the north and the south of the Mediterranean. And climate is the obvious example of that. It affects us all. And we should be ready to deal with these disasters, these natural phenomena, which are becoming more and more extreme. And we should cooperate more in dealing with that. And then obviously there's the issue of migration, but I left that to the end because it seems to me that everybody only remembers the southern neighborhood when they talk about migration, and always with a negative approach of let's stop them from coming. And I think we need a more holistic, a more broad encompassing approach of cooperation with the Mediterranean countries, not just merely focus on migration, and even when we talk about migration, not just this negative approach, but also thinking of we need more people, more workers in Europe. There's actually one of the biggest problems in European economies at the moment is a lack of workers, it's labor shortages. So we need to consider legal pathways for people to come. These talent partnerships are also a key factor, and we need to, I believe, look at the issue of migration in a more broader and more whole-of-government approach. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Mr. Antunes. Mr. Antunes touched upon very interesting European issues that, I mean, the stuff that have to be taken seriously by the entire Europe. Mr. Haritos, you specialize in Greek, Israeli, Cypriot relations, and I think we're all eager to hear your opinion from your wider Mediterranean perspective. Do you think that there is a European foreign policy for Southern Mediterranean, or can there be one even? Or to put it more provocatively, if that was not enough, does the EU really have a common vision for Southern Mediterranean?
Thank you for this question, and thank you very, very much for inviting me here in this very interesting panel. As we have said before, historically, before the EU, the EEC was looking at the northern coast of Africa and southeast of the Mediterranean from a financial way, from an economical way only. And this was normal because we talked about a European common market, and when we talk about market, we talk about economy. things got a bit more complicated when we have this transition from the economic aspect of Europe, and we are now in the political aspect of Europe. So the European Union is not only a factor of economy, but it is also a factor of policy making. I have the feeling that the shock that we all had of what happened in Tunisia should be a very good lesson to everybody in the European Union, and especially for the governments of the European South. I just want to remind you about the regime of Ben Ali in Tunisia. For many years, and the European Union, and especially France, was telling that Tunisia was the model of democracy in the Arab countries, because it was stable, because there were elections, because all the percentages were over of 90, 95 or 98.9% for President Ben Ali. And at the end of the day, everybody was shocked when what happened in Tunisia, it was the start of the Arab Spring. So I have the feeling that the European Union did not understand until now how to read the map of the northern part of Africa and of the Eastern Mediterranean in a correct way. Especially what is happening in the northern part of Africa, I think that it would be a good case study what happened in Tunisia and what is happening now in Tunisia, that we see there that the democracy did not find its way yet, but of course it is in a good pace. From that point of view, I think the vision of the European Union has to be thought again in order to formulate some factors that have to be the criteria of what the European Union has to do or should not do. We never forget that many countries of the European Union were colonial countries, colonial powers with their own agenda. And I think that this is the factor that does not give the space to the European Union to have its own vision, because if you have contradictory agendas, if you have historical frameworks different from one another that are expressed by the important capitals of the European Union, then we end up letting to the European Union to say all the theoretical and nicely phrases and words of smooth, soft policy without any substance. And on the other hand, we see the capitals, some capitals of Europe, continuing with the agenda they have due or thanks to their history. So once we talk about a vision, I think what we see the last years and after the Arab Spring and even before that is that the European Union sees itself as a factor of financial aid and as a way that they want to give some encouragement to changes in the structural political framework of the countries of the North Mediterranean and of the North Africa and East Mediterranean. I think we should be more honest, first of all, between ourselves in Europe, to sit down and think, what do we want from our neighbors exactly? If we think that we should continue with the same way that the EEC was looking at the area, it is a decision. If it is not that, we have to be very, very precise, because I feel that our neighbors do not understand what is the European vision. Also, we have to discuss in a clear way and honest way between ourselves how the European Union wants the societies of the southern part of Europe. Do we want the migrants to stay in the societies of the southern European states? Or do we want to have them for some time until the political situation in their countries is normalized, and then we should begin their integration, their reintegration in their homelands? These discussions, I have the feeling that are not touched as they should. The societies in the southern part of Europe ask themselves what the EU wants from them, and also our neighbors ask themselves what the Europeans want from them. These are issues that are not resolved, and the sooner the better if we sit down in an honest way and direct way, talk between ourselves and then with our neighbors.
Thank you for your very insightful analysis, Mr. Haritos. You built actually a very good argumentative bridge for my next question to Mr. Abunassar. Mr. Abunassar, from your point of view in Israel, how do you see the role of the EU in the region? Are they contributing enough? Should they, you're laughing, should they just keep their hands off? What are they doing right or wrong in your opinion? Please turn on your mic.
In Israel, many people believe that the EU is an Arab League plus, a little bit more organized than the Arabs, but not much more. So and EU is a payer, not a player. So, and this is how people treat the EU, not only by the way in Israel. You know, most friends in the Middle East, you know, treat the EU as a payer. You know, once I can tell you an anecdote. I told the EU heads of missions in Jerusalem, Ramallah, in the occupied part of Palestine, you know, that, you know, if I were a European taxpayer, I would put you on trial because you have been giving the Palestinians the largest amount of aid per capita in modern history. And there are two facts. Fact one, no horizon for ending the Israeli occupation. Fact two, the Palestinians are poorer than ever. So the European taxpayers' money is vanishing in the pockets of Israeli occupiers and Palestinian crooks. Anyhow, and this is, by the way, the Europeans are talking about Palestinian elections. It's fine, you know, but the only guys who want elections are the Europeans and the Palestinian people. Because Israel, Palestinian leadership, America, Egypt, and Jordan don't want elections. In the Middle East, we are more advanced. We like selection, not election. We cook the results and then we go to vote. So we are more advanced than the Europeans. So what I'm coming to say that in the Middle East, the four players are, international players, are committing grave strategic mistakes. EU and the United States are the fixers. They believe that we have the good things to give to the others, while not understanding that the others are not mature. You know, what it is democracy? Democracy is not only going to the ballot box. It is all sets of values which is not yet there. By the way, even not in Israel, though in Israel is another story. And there are the two hunters, the Russians and the Chinese, who are hunting opportunities and let the Middle East go to hell. So the most important to count opportunities. I do believe that there is a need of significant switch both in the European Union, but also in the various neighbors in Eastern Mediterranean about how to build relations built on mutual trust. So far, I define the relationship of mutual need and mistrust. I fear this would continue and would prevail for some time to come.
Thank you for your comments. I'm going to give the word to Mr. Florensa, but I want to mention something that I should have mentioned earlier. You can anytime catch my eye, raise your hand, make a comment, respond to something, criticize something. You're more than encouraged to do that. Mr. Florensa, please.
Yes. In fact, I think it's a question of the Europeans feel proud that we are helping some people around, for example, Palestinian people. The pity is that we have to supply what Israel should do as the occupier power. But anyway, we think that we are doing what we have to do to assist people in need there and elsewhere. Well, and I don't agree that much on that we have to think what do we want from the Southern Mediterranean countries and that they have to think what the European Union wants from them. They have their own opinion and they have their own priorities. And the point is that we have to really put the necessary means because the way in which we agree is very broad and is very well established. And in fact, there have been, of course, these agreements with each one of the countries in this European partnership that is working. The problem is that it is not working enough. And now we come to a point where the international community is, well, entering into a period of having extreme tensions. And then we have to make an extra effort to bring on board these partner countries, because they have treaties signed with the European Union of partnership, of deep partnership from the commercial side, although it has to be completed into the services and further on in agriculture and so on. And we are extremely committed with them. This is what the Barcelona process is about since '95. Now the Union for the Mediterranean is a good place for everybody, North and South of the Mediterranean, to meet, to agree on what has to be done together, not what we think they have to do or that they have to imagine what do we want from them. No, no, we meet together and we had, now, as the Minister said, the European Commission and issued this new agenda. Well, what it is trying to do is to face the challenges we have, which are global. As you said, climate change, the necessary energy transition, the digital transition, etc., and to face these challenges together with the South, because we can do and benefit, for example, for the transition in energy. It is obvious that there are immense resources in the South, not only in gas and oil, but specifically for the sustainable energies in soil and wind, etc., that can be transformed into electricity or in the next future in hydrogen to be transported, etc. And there are many complementarities, and we have to work together on that as we have done. But really, we have to take it more seriously in the sense that we have to put more means. Now, there is the hope that this new European Gateway Initiative, which is going to put for once a big quantity on the table, 300 billion. But this is for the whole world. Well, but this is an important quantity, similar to what the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. Now, what we have to do is to take advantage of the occasion to work together with the countries of the South to help them to do what we already agreed upon since '95, to build around the Mediterranean area of peace and stability, of shared economic progress and understanding and knowledge through intercultural dialogue. That's what we have to do. Now, with the urgencies that are much more important, with the outbreak of the war in Ukraine because of the Russian aggression, it is more necessary than ever, because we have to not only be together in Europe, as we have done already, but to bring all our neighbors, which is our natural area, together with us. And that's what is a challenge in this moment, because we have seen that in what's now known as the Global South, there are many different people, even in South Mediterranean. It's not the same thing, obviously, Morocco than Libya or Syria or Israel. But we have to work together to make a more harmonious neighborhood associated with us, because we deserve what they need and what they perceive that they need, and to bring together these place for the Euro-Mediterranean area in the new world order.
Thank you, Mr. Florensa. We have two voices from the audience, the lady behind there, and then you.
Hello, my name is Senada. I'm coming from Zagreb, from a public research institute. And I would love to address the question of Israel and Palestine, especially in the context of also the EU role. But I think, for me at least, the more pressing issue on thinking about migration and how we engage with Africa and how do we see the Mediterranean. And I really would like, you may not be experts, but you do know the region maybe better than some of us in other parts of Europe. I see that we are trying, as the European Union at least, trying to defend borders, create this fortress Europe or whatever we want to call it, and outsource migration responsibilities. And then we continue to pay, as you said. We just pay, because there is money still to pay. But one day there may not be money enough. And second, money cannot resolve all our problems. I think we rely too much on the fact that we can, manage somehow this very important human security, economic, and simply civilizational issue. The Mediterranean Sea is now the sea that divides us, and it's basically a deathbed for so many people. And I'm not speaking only from the humanitarian perspective, but also from security and economic perspective. So for the EU to engage really with Africa, which would be logical if you think of the future of multipolar world, and where do we stand as the continent, and who do we cooperate with, and where is our potential resources and space to develop. I think the European image of Africa has to change. So is there any advice from your side? Is there something that we are missing? Or which are the countries that we can count on? Or who can we cooperate with in North Africa, for example, in order to go then deeper? But what are the first steps? That would be my question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Haritos, and then Mr. Palau.
Thank you for the question. And I have planned it to talk about it because we already have the model of the trilateral cooperation, which is a new model, and for the Greek and Cypriot foreign policy, which both countries, until the revelation of the natural gas reserves, were focusing westwards. Now with the natural gas, they have to focus eastwards. I think that it's better now. So I fully understand your question, especially now that some kilometers from Sicily in Libya, we do not know which of the two governments is responsible for the country. And in Tunisia, as I said before, we have a crisis. In Lebanon, they have the difficulty with the economy and social problems. And Lebanon also has an energy future that it is important, and for Europe and for Lebanon. I think that the model, the new one, that we work on it and we learn from it day to day, year to year, since 2011 until now, the trilateral cooperation with the two European countries, Greece and the Republic of Cyprus, are implementing with our neighbors in the East from this model, and the European Union, and countries that now are revealing and they are looking at themselves as Mediterranean partners, such as Croatia, such as Slovenia. It is a great opportunity to learn about what we have done and what we haven't done yet. There is not a recipe. You need a recipe. There is no recipe. Tunisia is different from Libya. It was always like that. And Algeria is different from Morocco. many ways. Egypt, as you know, with the Suez Canal, it has a special role in the region that it is not the same with Libya and Tunisia and Morocco. What the EU needs, and I hope that, I trust you that there are, the specialists who know from inside those countries and the particularities of each of one. The EU should not do the mistake of the US to open the map and think that they have to deal with the region. It is simplistic. It is because they're far away, because they're used to see themselves as a superpower. China and Russia opens the map and sees a region. We, small countries, we know what nation is. Greece is the first nation state in the Balkans, the first nation state in the eastern part of the Mediterranean. 200 years of self-knowledge and knowledge of our neighbors. We are working on it, and we learned from it. It's a new model. Wait and see. Wait and see, and you as new EU partners, as a part of ex-Yugoslavia, which was a big lesson to everybody in the Western Balkans, I am sure that you have much to contribute on what we have learned or not learned yet.
Thank you very much. Before I come to the ma'am and gentlemen, Mr. Florensa, your mic, please.
Yes, I would like to answer the question, a very pertinent question that the lady down there has proposed, which is absolutely crucial, Africa. And I said that we started in '95 to take seriously the Mediterranean, although we have not made enough effort on that, because regimes in the south didn't accomplish their commitments to reform, but the northern side took it seriously, but not sufficiently with the appropriate means to bring about a change, historical change in the countries of the south. But this is nothing in comparison with what we need for the rest of Africa. The world in the future, anyway, will be in big regional areas. The world that we have been building is now cracking. And what will emerge on that, because it was going underneath in that direction, is a world, of course, interconnected. Of course, respecting the GATT or the International Commerce Organization, or World Commerce Organization, but to have free exchange areas in very big areas, Southeast Asia, the Americas maybe, or Latin America anyway, and our region has to comprise Europe, Mediterranean, and Africa. Otherwise, others will take care of it. And this means a huge effort that the European citizens have not yet realized. Some people in governments, maybe they start thinking on that, but the effort, and of course we'll have continued to pay much more and play, because we are playing. But the scale into which we have to make an effort in Africa has not yet been imagined. For example, migration. There is these days in the newspapers in different places, specifically, of course, in Spain, the results of a policy that the Spanish government has been following in the last 25 years already, having a strong, as Portuguese have done it for their side as well, a strong cooperation, financial, technical, and development cooperation with countries in Africa to tackle the origin causes of this migration. And through this, to have the agreements for them to keep the populations in their countries, providing them progressively with means to survive and to live and to progress, and even to accept back people who illegally are smuggled into the European Union. This is happening these days in different countries. this same week, thousands, because this addressing the deep roots of the migration has to be taken care of, and it has to be Europe that has to be to do that, and of course we'll have to continue paying.
Thank you very much. Mr. Antunes wanted to respond.
Yeah, so on migration, I just want to say we cannot accept that the Mediterranean Sea is transformed into a burial ground, and it's quite shocking to me that we go from shipwreck to shipwreck, and it almost now seems it's business as usual. And it's sometimes there's even no reaction. And this cannot be. We cannot stand idle and watch this go on. So we need to address this. From a European perspective, what we need to do, the roadmap is clear. We need to finalize our work on the new pact on migration and asylum, and particularly on the external dimension of migration. That means working with origin countries and countries of transit and origin, and as we were saying, addressing the root causes of migration and supporting and helping out in the development of these regions. And this is what needs to be done. And also, as I said, working, it seems like this is easy. It's not easy. It's one of the most difficult issues on the European agenda. But this needs to be done. And we need to also consider opening up legal pathways of migration. We're very much focused on illegal migration. But one of the best ways to avoid the activity of smugglers and human traffickers is to create legal channels of migration. So we need to, this is something that we absolutely need to do, and we cannot just accept the current status quo.
Thank you for your response. When I was preparing for this panel, I found a very interesting. Normally, you don't come across many positive news coverage about the migration issue, but that Portugal signed about a year ago, please correct me if I'm wrong, with the Moroccan government that it would grant Moroccan migrants the right to stay and work in Portugal, which I found really interesting. I think...
I just want to highlight that it is wrong to generalize about migration. You know, especially nowadays, I would like to talk about 3 forms of migration. Now, for instance, in Israel, there are many Israelis who either left or want to leave, mainly because of our great prime minister is transforming the country into regime. So those who are leaving are not necessarily the blacks. They are looking for different kind, or they want democracy. The others, you know, our European and American friends help Christians out of the Middle East, especially in the past 20 years, allegedly to help them. They practically helped Daesh kicking out Christians. So, you know, I can tell you personally, in 2013, I visited Moscow with a proposal to have an enclave in Syria itself for the minorities, because I argued, and I still argue, that those who would leave the region will not come back. So, but unfortunately, I failed, you know. The third, nowadays in the Middle East, there is rebellious generation. I don't, you know, this Arab Spring is an American terminology. By the way, the Americans understand the Middle East as I understand Micronesia, maybe a little bit less. Anyhow, what I'm trying to say, you know, Arab Spring, it is not Arab neither spring, because it is not only Arabs. We have to say, and we can talk for hours, that it was not only Arabs. And it was not a spring, not necessarily good, and not necessarily a season. This is, I argue that the Middle East is now similar to medieval Europe. We are transforming from feudal regimes to a kind of democracy. It will not be copy-paste. Nowadays, we are in era of rebellious generation. But most of these generations, by the way, are human rights seekers, so do not be afraid from this. However, a small minority are radical Islamists. Radical Islamists, they believe that they have the entire truth, so they are troublemakers wherever they will go. As we have some radical right-wing Jews, as we have some radical right-wing Christians in the United States. So I believe it is wrong to generalize, and we have to study things more deeply.
Thank you for your opinion, lady. Yeah, I can finally turn to you. Just for a second. Thank you.
Gabriel Haritos. First of all, Mr. Florensa, I would like to know, you are with which city? Are you with Brussels? With your institute?
No. Institute is an academic institution. It's Spanish. It is in Barcelona. It's been specializing in Euro-Mediterranean affairs in the last 35 years.
Okay, perfect. What I'm missing on the panel is, you are on the northern side of the Mediterranean, all of you. Where are the people from Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, Morocco? They are not on the panel. If you want to speak about the Mediterranean north and south side, you have to have the representatives here also. So the question is, how would the Israeli representative see Egypt these days, politically? How would Portugal see Morocco these days? How would Greece see the things going on between Greece and Turkey in terms of Libya? Okay? And how would you see Mauritania? Okay? Because what I hear from people in the North African rim of the Mediterranean is that the EU distributes a lot of money in form of a sprinkling rain, and nobody knows whether the money is going to be siphoned off in corruption. So what does the corruption index tell the EU on the case? Thank you.
Maybe one of the BSF colleagues would like to answer your question why there are not any representatives from certain regions. Mr. Florensa, you can start, and I think Mr. Haritos will talk about some part of what ma'am said.
I can give you my own testimony. I was living I've been working with the Arab world for the last 30 years, and I've been living there. I was a Spanish ambassador to Tunisia under Ben Ali, by the way, which was a difficult time, but in many respects, although the country economically went well. Don't bother, don't be preoccupied, because the European money is dealt with by the delegations of the European Union in each country, and it is surveyed as it is in Europe, because when you see that in public works, etc., financed by the European Union, that means that the European Union is taking care of how it is dealt with. So I am not a representative of the European Commission. I was not in Tunisia as a representative of the European Commission. I was a Spanish ambassador. But I can give you the assurance that the problem is not the corruption induced by the European Union. This is absolutely for sure. So be aware of that. Well, and I would like to have here some colleagues from southern countries, of course. I saw in the previous list that there were some of the people from different countries in the south that were to come. Finally, maybe, I don't know, there are Algeria and some others were to come, but this I don't know.
Thank you very much. This is your chance to talk about Greek foreign policy and Libya.
I agree with your... I have understood that you understand that there is... What I have understood from your question is that there is not a clear vision from the EU, and what does the EU expect from the neighbors in the south. I agree with you, but also I will add something, a detail that you might not know. Italy has its past with Libya. Italy knows Libya. Spain has its past with Morocco and the Canary Islands and West Sahara, of course. Portugal is very near to what you know better than I do, that they have also the knowledge of what is going on in the northern part of Africa. Greece, after the end of the Greek community in Egypt, which was a very important factor of regional policy and choices of the Greek foreign policy and the Cypriot foreign policy of the Greek Cypriot community, because also they had a big community in Egypt. At the end of this community, when the regime of Gamal Abdel Nasser has decided that he does not want any foreigner in his country, you understand that Greece was never a colonial country, was never outside of its borders to impose their agenda, and always the foreign policy of Greece was focused on Turkey, the Balkans, Europe, the United Kingdom, especially in the 50s and the 60s, US and NATO, and nothing else. Greece looked westwards, not southwards. This, we paid it. We paid a price for that. When Greek foreign policy was surprised of what happened with the memorandum of understanding on the maritime zones between Turkey and Libya. Turkey is a country, due to its Ottoman past, that can deal in a quasi-post-colonial ties with all the countries of the region, especially with Libya, which is, in a traditional way, pro-Turkish. We might have forgotten, in 1974, when the Turkish army invaded the northern part of Cyprus, the first leader of the Arab world who congratulated this thing was Muammar Gaddafi. Why? Because a year earlier he invaded, for the same ideological framework, north of Chad. So Turkey and Libya, it is a couple, it is an eternal couple. How this could be seen from Greece, what has passed, what is past is past. Our mistakes are our mistakes and we pay for them. Now it is the time, through the EU, to see what we are going to do in the north part of Africa. We do not have the know-how. As Slovenia is a small country, 2 million, and the diplomatic corps is small. It's normal. Also the Greek corps is small. And we do not have the experts that have this background that the experts in Turkey have, or in Italy have, or in Spain have. This is the time to see all the problems. It is late. It is late. But it is always late. That's it.
Thank you for your response. The gentleman over there wanted to ask a question.
Thank you very much. First of all, apologizing for missing part of the panel. To be on the safe side, I'm ambassador of Israel to Slovenia. And again, I didn't hear some of the panelists, so my point will be more generalized one in the context of what the EU and the EU countries could do, and in cooperation, in mutual cooperation with the Mediterranean basin countries. I don't know if maybe it was mentioned the Abraham Accords that Israel signed a few years ago with some of the Gulf countries and some of the North African countries. One of them is Morocco. The EU came with initiative for trilateral cooperation between the EU, Morocco, and Israel, specifically on topics which Israel has added value, for example, in the field of irrigation and water. This could be an example of what the EU could do together in the trilateral context. I don't know, it was mentioned, probably the peace process is not in its best these days, but I think the hope for the region and for us and the Palestinians, the people-to-people contact. In that context, I think all of us, and I'm not speaking about as a representative of the government of Israel, we should do our best to encourage any people-to-people contact in various levels, because when the right leaders will come in both sides, I think they can have a boost for possibilities to review the peace process. Another thing, I think the EU has a leading role in some fields like climate, cooperation, energy, etc. Also, Israel does have a very unique role in energy, and maybe one of my colleagues here did mention it. It was a question what Israel could do with Egypt. Israel is cooperating very strongly with Egypt on liquidizing gas, that the gas is going to Europe. So this is the opposite direction. Israel has a unique cooperation with Lebanon. We are still in war status with Lebanon, but we did sign an agreement with Lebanon more than a year ago, which probably some of the fruits of this energy, when European companies are involved in that, will go to European destination. Europeans are very much involved in helping the Palestinians, and Israel is also fully cooperating with the Europeans of helping the Palestinians. I myself, as the deputy head of mission of one of the European states, I manage a one-man show to try to convince one of the friendly government in Europe to review and send back assistance to the Palestinians in cooperation with Israel. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a special cooperation that we have in agriculture, health, etc., special courses that we made. Some of these, my colleagues know the name called Mashav. We managed to bring 2 million euros for the cooperation with the Palestinians in 2002. And the message from the Palestinians, we cannot accept it. That was lost of 2 million that would go for courses for the Palestinians that could take place. I think the fact that Israel is cooperating with almost every country in the Mediterranean basin, the fact that we have renewed our strong relations with Turkey is not at the expense of our relations with Greece and Cyprus, not at all. We're cooperating with both countries, and I think it's mutually benefit. And my last point, it was mentioned about Africa. Israel is very active in helping and having assistance in program assistance in Africa, in agriculture, health, etc. And I think the benefit is also, in the long run, also for the Europeans. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mr. Abunassar would like to respond to that. You don't have to, but the mic, please. Thank you.
The ambassador partially touched the issue of Israel-Egypt. You know, I respect his stance, though I believe that the relationship between Israel and all of its neighbors is mutual need and mistrust. I don't see real strategic alliance. I see mutual need and mistrust. This partially because of the instability of the regimes and partially because of the lack of clear end to the Palestinian cause, especially under the current Israeli government, which is not even ready to talk peace to the Palestinians. I do believe that there is a need to invest more into people-to-people, but I really believe that there is a need to have, especially by Israel friends, to talk more to all parts, to engage, because I do believe that there is an essential need for a solution to the Palestinian cause. Because despite the relationship between Israel, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, which are good, without solving the Palestinian issue, stability will not come to the region.
Thank you. The lady over there wanted to say something.
And EU member state money went to buy arms from Israel, especially now in the current war of Ukraine. How much money, billions, was paid for Israel for arm import, the arms that is currently being tested on the Palestinians. So inhuman, unethical, and how much money was invested in that. And I agree with you, the United States does not know anything about the so-called, by first the British colonization as the Middle East. They don't know us as people in the south of the Mediterranean, but they know our dictator regimes very well. Our dictator regimes that signed the gas agreement with Israel against the will of the people who are conscious about climate change, and they don't want this kind of resources of energy. They want renewable energy. But against our will, our dictator regime signed the agreement with Israel. How much money was put in that as well? And how much EU money was put on the arms from Israel? The arms that is tested on us, Palestinians.
Does any speaker want to respond to the comment of the lady? No. Excuse me?
Where are you from?
I'm from Jordan.
But from Palestinian origin, you must be, no?
Well, unfortunately, there's many stateless and undocumented Palestinians.
Yes, I'm aware.
Talking about the route of migration, how many Palestinians are displaced, yes. But no, I'm Jordanian, like born with a citizenship as a privilege.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. I will kindly ask everybody to stay on our topic. We are talking about Europe. We only have 15 minutes. There's one other topic I would like to touch upon, but I think Mr. Haritos wants to say something. Please be mindful of
the only just to be attached with the reality, the trilateral cooperations that the Hellenic factor has, and with Israel and the Palestinian Authority and Egypt and Lebanon and Iraq are based they are based on energy. And also the Palestinian Authority wants, I would like to answer to the kind lady, that also the Palestinian Authority wants this cooperation, and Jordan and Egypt, as we all know, they have a pipeline that connects the Israeli natural gas reserves to Egypt, and from there to the European market. It is not a matter of dictatorship or not dictatorship, yes, but the fact is that this is the energy route that we are doing, and we try to do, from the eastern part of the Mediterranean towards the European market and its economy. Economy is the name here. This is what we talk about.
Thank you. I'm going to give you the word, Mr. Florensa, but I am going to add a little question to it. The EU is often accused of being way too transactional in terms of its relations to its non-European neighbors. What do you think of that? Maybe you can include an answer in your response.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have seen, even in this session, that the Mediterranean, as I said at the beginning, is a very complicated area. And maybe we cannot solve in a couple of years problems of 2,000 years or more. But anyway, I think that we have now a great opportunity. And of course, the European Union has a big role to play. And as I would even say that this is an indispensable role, because even though the Arab Springs didn't succeed, or even in the places where they succeeded has been reversed somehow, except for some countries that took a reformist answer, as Morocco or Jordan, and they introduced some changes, or some countries who could finance the social peace because of the revenues of oil and gas, as it was the case of Algeria. But they need to go again and transform the countries in a positive way, and the only positive way they can do it is really in association with Europe, because Europe is their economic area. Depending on the countries, but 40% to 75% of their exports go to Europe. From Europe come the productive investment. Now from the Gulf comes some investment too, but it's mainly real estate and things like that. The productive investment comes from Europe. It's the place where migrants go to work and establish themselves. It's the place where the migrants' remittances come. It's an important point for Morocco and for other countries. It could represent 8 to 10% of the GNP which is an influx of foreign currency extremely important to finance the development of the country. So these complementarities is the most solid way to build really a common and shared progress. And now we have this urgency because of the global needs to produce the global goods, to take care of the environment and energy transition and so on. And we are lucky enough that these complementarities exist between north and south of the Mediterranean to overcome these difficulties, or at least a way to work together for the progress of both sides. So I think that we have a great opportunity to really continue and in a deeper sense succeed in what we have been working for so long to build this common area in the Mediterranean. And I repeat again what I said before. We have to bring on board the whole of Africa as well. As huge as it is, no other way. We need to do that. It is our own survival as a progressive society, because otherwise it will be so much kind of a chaotic way as we are seeing in Africa, that it will come to the prejudice of the whole of the world and specifically directly in Europe. And we have to consider the whole of Africa our partners and work together as them, and we have to be ready to pay and make a strong effort to do that.
Thank you.
And of course, corruption will exist, but we have to take care that what we do is not helping corruption, but the way around.
If you take in all of Africa, do you exclude South Africa, which is Chinese and Russian dominated?
We have to bring with us to all of them.
I think, Mr. Abunassar, just
our offer is
second,
much
please.
better.
Just 1 second. We have exactly 9 minutes. I'm going to give, in the end, to all of you a chance to make a closing statement. And we have definitely one question. I'm not going to send you home before taking your question. Please, Mr. Abunassar.
Well, just one sentence. Solutions shall not focus only on economy. It has to be combined. Economy, politics, and security. Economy alone will fail. Lebanon is abducted by Hezbollah. Do you think that giving money to Lebanon will solve the problem? Israel is occupying the Palestinian territories. Do you think that giving money to the Palestinians will solve the problem? Therefore, we have to have political, economic, and security solution. Otherwise, economy is only illusions.
Thank you. Here you go.
Yes,
please.
thank you
Up
very
to
much.
2 minutes,
Yeah,
I'm
sure,
kindly
I'll be
asking
very
you.
brief, because this was very interesting. It leads up to my question. And I just want to say that I absolutely agree with the panelists that Europe cannot close the eye to the rest of Africa. I mean, this is the issue that must be addressed. My question is to the panelists. So the South Mediterranean relationships with EU are going on since 1995. So this is a long time. And I would ask the panelists to say in 3 words, which are the benefits, in your opinion, of this relationship or these established relationships, and which is the biggest frustration? So very briefly.
Thank you for this interesting question. Who wants to respond? Please, Mr. Florensa.
I will try to give an answer very, very short. This Euro-Mediterranean partnership has produced progress, but not enough. That's the point. For example, take the case of Morocco, which was supposed to be the best pupil, le meilleur élève of the Euro-Mediterranean business. Along the 90s, they had like less than 1% growth. After, with the Euro-Mediterranean partnership, they raised it. They are making much better, 3.5% of growth annually. But to become a tiger, as in the West Asia, Southwest Asia, you need at least 7% or 6.4% for 15 years at least. And so they could not make the jump to become the tiger, but there has been some progress. The problem is that we do not see what would have happened if that Euro-Mediterranean partnership had not existed. Maybe the chaos would have been much greater. So there has been progress, but not enough, and not enough to the expectations of the populations. And this is why the Arab Springs revolutions came about, and this is at the same time why it failed. But the way is in that direction.
Thank you very much. Mr. Haritos, do you want to respond? No, then I misinterpreted it. Then I'm coming to the closing statements. No, I'm not actually. I want to ask a question to Mr. Antunes, because Mr. Antunes, you were in charge of the communications of the Portuguese government before your current role, and the topics that we are talking about. As I see, there is a very important component in it. If the EU conveys its messages successfully, if it's understood how it's perceived, do you think that the EU is successful at communicating its messages, motivations?
Well, we need to do it much better, for sure. There is obviously a communication side to it, and which is not, I mean, I would say it's not the central point here, but it's relevant, of course. We have to communicate better. We have to explain what we're doing, what we're trying to do. We have to, the whole issue of outreach with the region, engaging more, being more present, explaining our reasoning, not with a colonial or paternalistic approach, rather understanding and having a dialogue with the region. This is key. Also, in the current days, in the current geopolitical situation, to avoid that others occupy that space and to avoid the spread of Russian narratives, etc. We are seeing this not only in the north of Africa, but Africa as a whole and South America, well, in the global south as a whole. If we do not explain exactly what is happening in Ukraine, what is the European position towards this Russian aggression, then it will be the Russian narrative that will start being spread, and we need to avoid that. And for that, we need to do a lot more and a lot better in terms of outreach and communication. That's for sure. I believe everybody in the European Union is aware of that. Obviously, all the investment, all the money that we are putting in many of these countries, the investments through the global gateway are very important. But then we also have to explain our stance, our reasoning, and this is a challenge that we have. Clearly.
Thank you very much. I think we can survive a last question. If anybody wants to ask a question, I will wait for a couple of seconds. I don't think that anybody has any other questions, so we can come to the closing statements. I have a common question to all of you. We can start with you, Mr. Haritos. What do you think that the EU should change, should do differently in terms of its policy towards the Southern Mediterranean partners?
Differently. First of all, the EU has to decide after direct and honest dialogue between the South and the North of Europe, what is the vision and what is the goal once they talk about the Euromed policy and what they expect from our neighbors and what should it be, how it will be clear to our neighbors what we expect from them. The second is what kind of societies we want in the European South, multicultural, and vis-a-vis a more unicultural North. This has to be addressed in a direct way so that the societies and the citizens of Europe have to know what they vote for when they go to vote in the European elections. The third thing is that I have to say that the model of the trilateral cooperations is a model that it is new in the European Union, and it is cultivated by the Hellenic factor in the Eastern Mediterranean. Hellenic factor is Greece and the Republic of Cyprus. Very successful is the trilateral with Israel, which is under the aegis of the United States, with Egypt, with Jordan, with the Palestinian Authority. We had the visit of the President of Cyprus in Jordan and the Palestinian Authority in August, which was very important. And there are those moves for Iraq, Greece, Cyprus, Iraq. That would be a very good idea to think about how we can handle the situation in Libya. Why not a trilateral between France, Italy, and Libya? Why not a trilateral for the migration between Italy, Malta, and Libya? Why not a trilateral for France, Spain, Algeria? The EU can take this model, learn from what we have done, learn from what we have not done, and see what will be for the future. We have done the start. Let's continue.
Thank you very much. We literally have 30 seconds, and my colleague is asking me to finish it. So please, up to 30 seconds each, and then you're going home.
I will continue with the trilateral cooperation to insist on Africa. The real trilateral business in the next future and for many years will be to work together with southern Mediterranean countries to work together in the rest of Africa. This is being done already. There are many firms from France working with Tunisian colleagues to produce investments in Senegal or elsewhere. Spanish people who, with Moroccan people, go together in other countries. So the South Mediterranean countries can really be a bridge between Europe and the rest of Africa. We would help, therefore, to develop economically and to modernize the institutions, the mentalities, the society, etc., in Northern Africa in doing so. So we have to confront the future challenges of the transformations we need, as we said, in energy, etc., in Europe with them together, because there are complementarities, and then apply this trilateral game, so to say, to work together in the rest of Africa.
Thank you very much. Please, up to 30 seconds each, otherwise I have to interrupt you because my colleagues are asking.
Well, 2 points. First, that the EU and the EU member states has to use more coercive diplomacy. No free money. Second, there should be groups, not necessarily trilateral, maybe in some cases trilateral, some other cases 4 or 5, but there should be groups of working groups vis-a-vis some problems in the vicinity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Antunes.
Okay, just picking up on a previous question on how does Portugal view Morocco. We have a very old, amicable, and strong bilateral relationship and cooperation with Morocco. You mentioned earlier the labor agreement, and we have cooperation in many fields, economic, cultural, etc. The same goes for many other countries in the north of Africa and the Maghreb. So this is not the issue, our bilateral cooperation and our understanding of the region and our focus on the region. I would say that the challenge here is that this cannot be just a concern of the southern European countries. It has to be a concern of the whole European Union. And northern European countries must also have this focus and this concern in mind of the southern neighborhood. And this is where we still have work ahead, so that this is a major concern of all the European Union and not just the countries bordering the Mediterranean.
Thank you very much. As you can see, it's a difficult region, and that is exactly why we need more of these conversations. A big thank you to our panelists and the members of the audience. Have a nice late afternoon and evening.